I want to apologize in advance for this video. My microphone was way too close to my mouth, and every single plosive peaked it. Enjoy.
Ruin has come to our family.
I'm Reginald Gickton, and you can call me Reggie, and today we'll be continuing our painting journey through the miniatures of the Darkest Dungeon board game by Mythic Games. Today we're going to be finishing off the skeletons, and that means we're doing the Bone Captain and the Bone Bearer. These two late-game enemies are some of the most dangerous things in the ruins, and looking at them you can really tell. With their impressive sets of armor, the hefty mace wielded by the captain, and the cursed banner wielded by the bearer, you can tell as soon as you encounter them that they're a priority threat. Because they're so similar, we're going to follow the same set of steps to paint them both. Speaking of which, I started by priming them in black, as is typical. For our first step, we're going to use Leadbelcher, Corn Red, and Retributor armor. Leadbelcher is going on all of the steel armor and weaponry parts, while Corn Red is going to be somewhat targeted. On the captain, it's going on his belt, on half of the ruffles on his sleeves, and his loincloth. Meanwhile, on the bearer, it's going on the top half of his banner, his loincloth, and the tassels on his shoulder pads. Finally, Retributor armor is going to be used on all the fancy golden armor trim, like the edges of the captain's shoulders or the porthole in the bearer's helmet. Do note that, on the bearer, the skull on the banner gets gold, while the spiked decorations around it get steel. Be sure to reference the original game art for referencing where the placement of gold and steel parts is. Now we're going to use Rakarth Flesh and Ghost Grey. The former is going to go on all of the bone elements, like the exposed knees and arms of the bone bearer or the skull on the captain. The latter is going to be used just for the captain on the non-red parts of his sleeves. Do note that, unfortunately, the bone captain has an alternating red and white pattern on his sleeves, but 7 sections sculpted into his model, meaning he's naturally going to have either 2 red or 2 white sections next to each other. What I recommend you do is place those under the armpit where they're hardest to see, and then during the shadows step, try and cover over that transition. The next step is going to be Steel Legion Drab. We're going to use this on the leather elements, like their gloves, the captain's boots and pants, etc., but also the wood parts, like the banner's shaft or the mace's hilt. Our last base tone is going to be Mechanicus Standard Gray, applied all over the bearer's banner, with the exception of, naturally, the red part. Now we're going to wash the minis with an all-over coat of black wash. The only parts we don't want to bother with right now are the hilt of the mace and the shaft on the banner. Our minis are already looking 20 times better, but we're going to keep going. And now we're applying Cygor Brown to those elements I mentioned previously on the banner and mace. We're also using Wildwood on the elbow sections of the captain's sleeves, between the ruffles and the gloves, and the various straps around his armor. We're going to do some highlighting now. Rakarth Flesh and Steel Legion Drab are going to be used to highlight the various bone and leather elements, respectively, and then we're going to cover all of the Retributor armor in a thin layer of Runelord Brass. You want to avoid some of the recessed areas, like for example leaving a little gold donut around each of the bolts on the captain's collar, or the sides of the bearer's shoulder embellishments. You're looking for those large flat surfaces. It's going to produce a lovely and understated tarnished gold effect if done correctly. Now we're going to highlight those red and white elements. We're using dead white as a highlight on the captain's white ruffles, and for the red parts on each, we're going to start with corn red. Don't forget, while you're using it, to do 2 thin stripes on the banner's gray section. Finally, we're using Mephiston red as a fine detail highlight towards the tips of the shoulder tassels and loincloths. We're going to highlight the banner next using Mechanica Standard Gray once again, and then we're going to use Dawnstone, which is applied all over the eagle at its center. Now in-game, the banner's eye glows with a strange blue alien light, which I elected not to replicate here. But if you wanted to do so, I would recommend Citadel's Macragge Blue as a freehand, followed by Vallejo Electric Blue and Vallejo Ghost Gray as a general and specific highlight, respectively. If you choose to do so, be sure to send me a picture. I'd love to see how yours turns out. And of course, we're going to finish these guys off the way we do all of our Darkest Dungeon minis, with the base in the shadows. And that's that. The bone mini-bosses are done. I think they turned out really great and look really menacing. With them being squared away, we finally finished our roster of bone enemies, and what a journey it's been. With all these skeletons taken care of, we need something to command them, and to raise these undead legions we've worked so hard on. So I look forward to seeing you all for the next video. In the meantime, have fun painting your Darkest Dungeon miniatures, and feel free to tag me on Instagram, @ReggieGick, to show me how yours turn out. Links to my affiliated socials can be found in the description. Feel free to subscribe or like the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon with another painting tutorial.